This is Joey, and this is usually my YouTube setup for teaching things. But today, unfortunately, this is not a course or some kind of equipment overview. This is actually a video that I'm shooting to pay my respects to one of my mentors in life. His name is Creston Funk. He passed away last Sunday. And I have had a lot go on in the past week that kind of caused me to just have to swallow that he passed away and hold on to it for a little bit while I got through some things, and circle back. So it was kind of traumatic, but also expected. Unfortunately, Crescent had gotten Alzheimer's around, I believe, 2015. And so I hadn't really gotten to see him since then. He had moved to California and was in a memory care unit. And, that really kind of changed everything in terms of my relationship with him. I talked to him on the phone a couple of times, but for the most part, I hadn't really gotten to have any kind of interaction with him. But for those that don't know, I'm really into HiFi. And I own a HiFi store with Christian Rios in San Antonio, Texas, called Dreamanoids HiFi. And, this HiFi store, everything about it is attributed to Creston Funk. Everything. I mean, I could, Christian will agree with me, hands down. And what that kind of means is that when I was 16 years old, I went into a hi-fi store called Concert Sound. And Concert Sound looked kind of like this. Let me see if I can get that photo a little bigger, because I know this is going to be small screen anyways. Concert Sound was in the yard in San Antonio off McCullough and Bassey. And I walk in there. I'm this 16-year-old Latino kid. I had read in a book that said to look in the yellow pages when those things existed, and you would find a hi-fi store. And so I called, and there was this place called Concert Sound, and I walk in. Circus wasn't there, that dog that you see there. But I walk in, and this guy named Mark Keaston greets me and a friend, my best friend Danny Mann at the time. And he proceeds to just show us around as if we have $1 million to spend. And I had never, to that point in my life, been treated like just so warmly at any kind of business. I had just never gone someplace and they'd be like, "Oh, you're probably looking to maybe buy the smallest thing we sell here in a couple of years when you've saved up enough money." In their head thinking that, and instead just show us everything all the way up to like a $60,000 then hi-fi, which was probably, I don't know, $90,000 today. And so we go to this shop, and I end up just hitting it off with him and with Mark. And then a couple times later, I come and I'm listening to his system, and I may have been playing it kind of loud. And I get this guy and comes in, and he like yells at me to turn the system down because this is a very special system. And that was Creston. That was Creston Funk. And I never really ever interacted with him while I was a customer there. It was really interesting. He was just always on the go. He would come in and come out. He'd have Circus with him. But he was always doing something. It was kind of like a flash of light would come in and out. And if he was there at the shop, it was very like short as to the kind of experience I would get there. I would just kind of show up, be like, "Oh, Creston's here, so I'll just say hi and head out," because, it was just different. And so all that, on a guy that's passed away, I'm talking about how he just blew me off. But it reminds me of myself sometimes when I've been in the zone, and I actually did that to my business partner, Christian, when he wanted to take my audio class and it was full. he was like, I really want to be in this class. I'm really into audio. And I was all like, yeah, man, whatever. Okay, cool. Anyways, I got these other students I need to talk to. So I say it in a very loving and endearing way about Creston. But anyways, I got to meet him and get to know him when Mark had to move, and it was 1999 2000 era, and Mark had to move to Ohio, and Creston needed someone to help him with the shop, and in parallel, I had learned how to make websites in college. I was going to UT at that point, and he had asked me to help him with a website. And the first website I built was for this guy named Brian DeFrank up in Austin at Whetstone Audio. He gave me like my audio break into web design, and so Creston saw that website and was like, I want you to make my website. So this is like one of my versions of the websites from like the early 2000s. And I think it was marked as like 2003 or something like that. But I save all my websites, or try to. I couldn't find the first one I did. But anyways, I digress. I'm going to digress a lot here. If you came in here to listen to like a non-Joey Long story, then you can probably just check out right now, because this is one that like you just have to sit here and hear it in order to appreciate it. And it will have value and it's worth listening to, but it's just one that this guy, you're going to see some photos and some things that, to me at least, kind of exude how, if you know me, like you'll be like, oh, you don't know anything. You just took this from this other guy, kind of thing. You'll get to know a lot about me and a lot about the other people around me, and how we've kind of just been cheating because we had Creston as a guide. So we hit it off, and I started working with him, running this shop, and it changed my life. I mean, it changed everything in my life. Like, you name it, it changed it. I hung out with him one summer and I lost 80 pounds. He was a health nut. He was someone that believed in just, being super, super healthy. I mean, like when we found out he had Alzheimer's, we were just like, wow, that's really unfortunate, because like 2001, he came up to me one time at the shop and was just like, I have cancer. And I was like, okay. And, he was definitely someone that wasn't joking around when he said that. And, I was like, well, how do you know you have cancer, Creston? Like, did you go to the doctor? And he's like, yeah. No, I didn't go to the doctor. I just got some blood work done, checked my PSA, which those of y'all that know what the PSA is, it's, older people that are over 40, which I'm about to be 40, get their PSA checked because it's an early indicator of prostate cancer. So he tells me he has cancer. He flies up to Johns Hopkins to go find out about this experimental surgery they're doing. He gets approved for it, and then he decides not to do it. And I'm just like, okay. So then he, his family flies down, like his kids, and he proceeds to just research for like, I don't know, a week straight. Like when I say, like a week straight. This is back when we would print out our articles that we found on the web and compile them all and look through them all and call people and follow up and see what all the different options, all the different procedures are. And basically, after about 5 years of deciding on what to do, he picked one that ended up being what most people do now, which is like a light chemotherapy directed right at the cancer itself, but then was just experimental and not what people were doing at the time, but it's what everybody does now. And so it was just like, that's a story of Creston. Like he's the kind of person that would just go to the end of the earth to figure something out, because that's how he was going to live his life. I mean, that is a lot of like how I learned to live. And he didn't always agree with the decisions I made when I would go and do it, because I think y'all know I'm pretty extreme when it comes to like civil rights and quote, doing what's right in situations, and undertaking some really big hurdles and things to jump through in order to reach those goals. And Creston wasn't one to get into politics too much. He was one to lay low, but whether he realizes it or not, or whether that's what he wanted or not, that was his stubbornness in terms of aesthetic is what influenced my stubbornness in terms of political activism and civic engagement. So there's that. That goes to you, Creston. And then we just kept going. We kept developing the shop, and at one point, I asked Creston to come up to Austin, and so he came, and he liked it, and he was like, "I really like it here," and I was like, "Well, that's cool, man. You'll have to come and visit more often." He's like, calls me like a week later. He's like, "I got a place up in Austin, and I'm just gonna move up there." And Creston had lived in San Antonio like his whole life, basically. I mean, he had lived in some other places for a couple of years, but he had never, I mean, his whole life was in San Antonio. And so he picked everything up and moved to Austin. And my wife then, Karina, who was my girlfriend when I met Creston, literally we moved in the same apartment complex as him in 2003, I believe. And he said, "If you move into this apartment complex, it will change your life. I promise you." And what he was really asserting was that in Austin in 2003, that was when downtown, like the precursor to downtown blowing up, there was one loft. It was called Austin City Lofts. And across from there was Hut's Hamburgers. And then one block over was the Gables West, which was an apartment complex that was relatively new and was right like within walking distance of Lady Bird Lake. And that year that we would be there, over that time, they would open up the new Whole Foods downtown. And so, Karina and I, we lived there about 2.5, maybe 2 to 3 years, and it changed our whole perspective on living downtown, being urban, because we grew up in San Antonio. We grew up in this podunk town. Yeah, it was big, but it was just very, very different mindset. Not the kind of mindset that you'd be used to if you were in a more urban environment, which Texas had very little at that time, and Austin was like just had a sliver of it, just enough to like get us going on it. And we loved it, and we stayed there for a good, like I said, 2 or 3 years. And Creston and I, we hung, I mean, going from hanging out a little bit to a lot. And it was a really, really, really crazy time in my life because at that point I was doing my master's and my PhD and getting to interact with him. So I'm going to click over to some photos. Now, these photos aren't Austin, okay? You see this place here. This is actually, Creston lived in San Antonio, Texas, off the river, which like back in like 99, he lived off the river in San Antonio. You could see the river barges go by, his apartment. Like you could look out the windows. It was like 270 degrees of windows in that little space. And man, he had an aesthetic that just was amazing. I mean, if you just look at this photo, you can see the aesthetic. Yeah, it was a little messy. He had some books out. He was doing some work. But, he always had just amazing art, amazing photos, and just carried himself in such a way that there was a lot there to be talked about. My best friend, Andy, here, and his then girlfriend, now wife, were hanging out with us that day. This is Karina sitting on the other side of the room, just hanging out. This is Andy and stuff, just kind of hearing what Creston's telling them, and Creston's just sitting there talking. And as you can see, I love taking photos. I always have. So I was lucky to get to record some of this stuff. Now, this is a beautiful turntable that you see here that Creston had procured. But with Creston, there was always a story. Creston was always on the hunt for really good hi-fi. So this turntable wasn't just like a turntable that you ordered on Amazon. Okay, there was none of that back in the day, and you still can't order this thing on Amazon, by the way. You can't even get this thing, even if you wanted it. I know of like 2 in the US. Okay, Creston would search to the edge of the earth, like I said, to answer things. And one of the things he was super passionate about was hi-fi. So this was a turntable that was developed, I believe, in Zoffe, Switzerland, if I said that right. Hopefully I'm not butchering the name. And it is made by this company called Razan, and it's the Razan Rota, which you see maybe, I don't know, the videos may not be clear enough. It says ROTA on the slip mat. And it was about an $8,000 turntable then. And it had this really special Lexi Razan cartridge on it. And the design of it was purely to play music back at the best, in the best possible way. And everything in here was functional yet artful. So there were turntables that cost a lot less than this, and there were turntables that cost a lot more than this. But this turntable sounded amazing. And so Creston would literally like call up these companies and figure out how to get a translator and figure out how to communicate. And it would take us, like, this wasn't a week-long process where we would call them, oh, okay, well, we got a hold of it. It was like 2 years later, and it would just show up, and it would show up like in a wooden crate, just like you would think of, like, if we were like curators for a museum or something. And then this is Circus. This was his Russian wolfhound. He had a lot of other pets, evidently Russian wolfhounds and Afghans. I didn't get to meet them, but I got to meet Circus, and Circus was a circus. He was temperamental, to say the least. But I only lost a couple of shirts to Circus. He meant well. But he was, he was someone that interacted with Creston in a way that you just, those are all that are dog lovers understand. I'm not a dog lover, to be quite honest with you. And Circus is one of the reasons why I'm not. But at the same time, in that same duality, I understand why. He was someone that, like you can see in this photo right here, Creston and Circus just really, really, really got along. And it was amazing. I mean, it was I had never seen that kind of interaction with a pet. When people say they love their pets, I understood that, but like Creston really exuded it with him. These are some electronics that we ended up importing together. And I say together because like he and I went through like a whole process when we ended up moving up to Austin. Like the electronics I'm showing you right here, he just kind of bought to check them out. But we ended up meeting the developer of these, Peter Moore, from Scotland, Glasgow, Scotland. And he, like, Creston set up such a rapport with him that they would just come and, like, Peter would just stay with me at my house. So, like, when I learned about HiFi with Creston, it wasn't like mentor mentee. It was reciprocal mentoring. Creston always put me in the position to just start learning. He would be like, oh, there's this call, go talk to these people. And talk about having to overcome some adversity. I had this like lawyer from Tesoro yell at me one time and berate me, and I just like left. And Creston was like, why did you leave? And I was like, dude, the guy was yelling at me. He's like, oh yeah, well, no, that's a good reason to leave. And I was like, oh, okay, Creston's not crazy. He just didn't know what was going on, and things like that. But mainly Creston would just like, he was the kind of person that, you have those culture magazines that you get every week, like The Current in San Antonio or The Chronicle in Austin. And he was the kind of person that would go through it and go find things for us to go and do and be like, we need to go check that out. Like that's going to be something. Let's go. And we would drive all over, my wife and I and Creston, and we'd go on vacation together. Andy and Steph would come with us. I mean, Creston was just always seeking things out. Like, to circle back to, my first break in HiFi, I got a website that I made for Brian DeFrank at Whetstone Audio. And I'll never forget taking Creston to Whetstone, because Creston was always, he reminds me of my business partner, Christian, where he's like, any competition is competition, and we walk into Brian's shop, and Creston was like, oh, okay, like this is like serious. And I was like, yeah, man, this is the first person I helped out before I helped you. So, I mean, I would think they'd have pretty good aesthetic. So he sees this. What this is it's a CD player, tube powered, single speaker system. So you would like it was kind of like if you grew up in the 90s and you remember CD-ROMs, it had an eject button and a play button. Like you could literally play a CD without having to use the computer. That's what this was. And so Creston saw it and was just like, I have to have this. And they were like, well, yeah, I mean, it's for sale. He's like, no, like I'll take it. And they were like, okay. And so Creston like literally bought this like the first time we went. But that's the kind of person Creston was. And he wasn't the kind of person that was like, and so how much is it? Oh, it's $7.95. Okay, well, can we do $6.95? He was just the kind of person that was like, I see that. I respect what went into it. The aesthetic is amazing. Let's just, whatever y'all want for it is what it is. And we'll just do that. And that little lesson there is like something that I've learned and picked up when I do business with other small business owners, to be fully transparent, is that if I walk into a shop and your prices are your prices, that's what I come in and pay, because as a small business owner, it's like a mutual respect. And he definitely taught me that. He definitely taught me like, yeah, there are times to bargain and there are times to like, make sure you make your money. But there are other times where, you want to build relationships and you want to build a respect and understanding between people. And so to me, like that had so much value, and it's had so much value as I've gone through life. Yeah. So let me come back over here. I would get to like literally, I mean, we would hang out till like 12 at night. So I'd like meet up with him like at 8 in the morning. We'd go walk Creston. We'd go walk Circus in San Antonio back in the day. And we would work on the shop and we would, eat together, like just everything, go for long walks. Like, I mean, this guy could walk like nobody's business. He never ran. I never saw him run in his life, but he definitely walked. And so I would have my camera with me and I would just like shoot away of him working on stuff, things that were being created. But we just always had some kind of weird thing going on, or some kind of small story. Like, I can't even remember what this thing was called, but it was like this old school player where like you could put a quarter in. I don't know if you can see the quarters, but he literally had some like just sitting there. And you would put a quarter in, this thing would just start playing tunes away off of this script right here, literally. And yeah, so we were just always like, there was always some weird thing going on. This was like a huge undertaking by Creston, Takaro loudspeakers. These are German-made, full-range loudspeakers that were basically unobtainium and didn't exist until they did. And so it was like we would talk about them for like 2 or 3 years, and then finally, like much like the Razan turntable, they were like, okay, they're here in Houston. Okay, now we got through customs. Now they're gonna be here, and they got a U-Haul, and I get called down from my apartment and where I was living in Austin to go help unload and bring all of these speakers in, and that was what we would do. And so this is one of the, I don't have, if you can believe this, I don't have very many photos of myself and Creston together. This is one that we have right here. And this is, obviously myself and when I had my mohawk, and Creston, and I assume Karina took this photo, but it was very, very rare that we had photos together. Most of the time, we were just either the ones taking the photos, or we were just working so much that we didn't have any photos. This is Creston talking with Mark and Creston the third, Creston's son. We met up a lot. We would have people fly in from all over the nation, literally, like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and then every little town, city you can think about, Kansas City. I mean, just all over, to come hear the HiFi that we were making. And this was like Creston's vision. So like, Even at even in Austin, he lived in 3 different apartments in that apartment complex while we were there, and this was the second one, and every single one had like just different feels to it, different aesthetics to it. And this one was really interesting. This was the one where Christian got to go to, and one of my other good friends and colleagues, Jonathan Guajardo, also went to. That they got to meet Creston probably, oh man, I want to say like 2013, somewhere around there, maybe 2012. They went up to South by Southwest and met up with Creston, and then another time Christian went up and visited with them, and these spaces were just amazing. And I have lots more photos. Oh, that was a car that Creston had. That's not a stock photo. That's a photo Creston the third took of Creston Senior's car, or Junior's car, I guess I would say. But whoops. This is like, for example, this is the second or third. Man, Creston did have a bunch of places. This is another space that Creston had in the same complex, where we had. I had done a video installation where I got these 3 TVs. We put some gels over each one. So I was really just playing them in black and white, but we put gels over each screen. And what it ended up doing was it was just like this loop of hi-fi. And as you can see, it had a really nice aesthetic look. Now for some really cheesy OCD things about Creston, and I've probably lost all of y'all, but it's cool. I'm going to keep going for those 3 people that are listening to me. Creston, you see this reflection of this light right here? Like, it drove Creston so nuts that one time he got someone to get a ladder so that he could open it up and put foil in here so that we wouldn't have that reflection anymore. Like, that's how passionate Creston would get about things that were going on, is that he would like want to have something changed. So anyways, I guess my point is that, Creston drove how I understood aesthetic, how I understood treating other people. He was so influential that I wrote about him in my dissertation about my pedagogical approaches. So in my sections here, let's go over here. If we go to whoops, I meant to pick the other one, sorry. This one. If I scroll down, it says the beginning of learning through facilitation, not dictation. So this is where I talk about how I learned about how to be a facilitator and not a dictator. And then it says bringing facilitation into the classroom. And then it says breaking down objections and creeping socialism. And so in my dissertation in 2009, 2010, like, I literally integrated a lot of what I'm telling you all into my work, talking about how I learned to teach through working at a HiFi store and working with Creston. So I literally integrate him and talk about how, Creston and a customer listens to HiFi. How I learned to break down people's objections. Like, one of the things Creston always told me was that instead of trying to convince people of something, like, why don't you just ask them what they're objecting to? What is it that makes you uncomfortable about this? Oh, is the price? Is it the aesthetic? Is it the sound? Is it, what is it? So that they tell you and you're helping them rather than you putting pressure on them and them just getting frustrated and walking out. I talk about, I said, we didn't see the customer again for a few months. And then one day he walked in and said, I'll take it. And he wrote a check for the entire system. And this still happens to this day. I have students, I have customers that come into the shop and are like, you know what, I'll take it. I'm like, what? He's like, the system we talked about, a couple months ago. I want it. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. And I always think of Creston whenever that happens, because, it was one of those things where, like, if you put the time in, you get the time out. If you put the time in, you get, you can often get rewarded for it. So anyways, I share all this because one, he meant a lot to me, but also because I think, there's value in telling you about him as a person that was influential for me and a lot of other people I know, and played a role in San Antonio in terms of hi-fi stores. There was only one. There's Bjorn's, but that's not hi-fi. No offense to Bjorn's. They sell home entertainment systems, which is perfectly fine and something totally different. But someone that came in and sold a system that was integrated to play your turntable and your amp and your speakers in a way that just pure music came out. There was no other store like it. There were other like electronic stores and stuff like that. And so that's a tradition we've kept at Dreamanoids Hi-Fi, is that like we sell systems that sound great together. And so when y'all think, oh, like you just must be into electronics, it's like, no, there's a lot behind what we do and how we do it that harkens back to Creston and Mark, who I've mentioned before, and how we sell, develop, and produce our content for hi-fi. It's something we're very, very passionate about and something that we love a lot. So I don't think I've said a lot in this video, but I think I've said enough. And I know this video is longer, but I appreciate y'all listening. It's something like kind of personal to me, kind of appreciate you listening, because life hasn't been easy. As y'all know, we're going through COVID, but I've also just been going through a lot of other things in life right now. And I felt like recording this is something that I needed to do. I was going to write like an article, and I still might, but I had to kind of just get this down and pay my respects to Creston, because I would not be who I am today without him. And he's just an amazing person that I'll never ever forget or take for granted. He's someone that just had a deep impact in my life. So with that said, I was kind of debating on how to show y'all two other things. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the description of this video. And if I post this on Facebook, I'll put it in the comments. I'm going to upload a video that I produced in evidently September 25th of 2005 about Creston and Circus, though I think it was much earlier than that. I think that's just when I exported this particular version. About Creston and his dog and just kind of who he was. And it's just this short, for those of y'all that don't know me, I do abstract videos. Like that's like my major art talent, if I had a talent, which I'm a hack of an artist, but I do abstract pieces. And this was a piece that kind of was like this abstract interview with Creston, more for the intangibles of who he is than for a direct story. And then I have this other piece that's kind of like a short interview with him about what hi-fi is. And this is a piece I made in, this actually looks like an original piece because it was a November 11th, 2002. So what I'll do is I'll put those up on my YouTube channel unlisted and put them as links in the video so y'all can check them out. So I hope y'all are having a great day. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble, and take it easy.